More cities are looking at mandates that would force landlords to provide air conditioning for their tenants for the summer heat. But are they necessary? I don't think so. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of the great city of Kansas City, Missouri, okay, my hometown. I'm actually from Kansas City, Kansas, but, I just say I'm from Kansas City, and, everybody knows what I'm talking about. So, anyway, Kansas City, Missouri is one of those places where they do not require landlords to have air conditioning for their tenants, right? Most cities don't. Now, there are a few very large cities that do, and, primarily in much more hot environments, such as in Phoenix, Arizona, where it gets to be 115 degrees for a long period of time in the summer. Believe me, it is like an oven there, okay? I used to live in Arizona. I know what it's like. I can understand why these mandates are in place there, but even in places like Phoenix, I don't think the laws are necessary because guess what? The majority of landlords, the grand overwhelming majority, I'm talking about 99% plus of landlords are already providing air conditioning for their tenants. They do not need a law to tell them to do it. It makes business sense, okay? If you are competing against other landlords and all the other landlords are charging the exact same amount a month for rent, and they all have air conditioning and you don't, well, guess who is not going to be able to rent their apartment? You. Okay, so the business market itself solves this problem. Yet they tend to think that, these landlords are greedy, they're not providing air conditioning, people are overheating or, facing medical issues because of it. That's just not the case, okay? Now, the example they use in this story, it's a garbage example. I'm going to explain why as I get into the article. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think. Do you think the city should be mandating that landlords provide air conditioning for their tenants? Not only do I not agree with it, right, but I think it could have unintended consequences. So I don't like government mandates that force landlords to do things because it seems like every time they implement a law like that, it always has these unintended consequences, right? They're like, we demand that the landlord has to make the temperature below a certain level, right? And the only way to do that would be to, do some crazy stuff, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and, insane when the living conditions were just fine before that. So you know what? These laws, they always tend to punish small mom and pop landlords the most. So let me give you an example. You have a house, right? And small mom and pop landlord owns one rental property. It's a house. And the city says, you must provide air conditioning for your tenant, right? Which landlord does just fine, provides a nice window air conditioning unit for the house. And, can't afford the full central air. It's an older home. Here you go. Here's your nice window air conditioning unit. The city comes in and says, you're not in compliance because the entire home isn't down to this certain temperature level. And so therefore, you need to fix this. And then that small landlord's like, well, what do I have to do to fix it? Well, you need to go out and spend $10,000 so that you can get a full central air conditioning unit so the entire house is cool. And the landlord's like, hey, I don't make that much money. I was renting this for a nice low cost and just trying to provide a nice cheap housing. And I, got a inexpensive window unit that, keeps a good portion of the home clean or cool, but that's all I can afford right now. Well, no, you just can't do that. So you know what that small landlord does? He said, you know what? I'm throwing my hands up. I'm quitting. I'm out of the rental business. I don't want to deal with this anymore. So you start to see less rental properties, or the landlord could say, okay, well, I can do this. I can provide exactly what the city wants, but I can't do it for the rent that I'm charging. So I'm going to have to increase the rent exponentially in order to cover the $10,000 cost. See, and like I said, there's always going to be unintended consequences because bureaucracy, government, right? They think they know better than the people who are actually running these businesses, and they don't. They don't. Anyway, let me get into this article and let you know what it says. This article is coming from kcur.org, and it says, Kansas City has no laws protecting renters from the deadliest weather phenomenon, heat. I always laugh when I read about this stuff, right? Because, they're always talking about climate change. Like, man, we can't believe it's hot in the summertime. Like, yeah, it's been hot in the summertime, well, for a very, very long time, before any of us were born. Okay, it's been hot in the summertime. I remember triple-digit days in Kansas City back in the 80s when I was a little kid. Okay, triple-digit. It was over 100 degrees sometimes for a long period of time. Nobody was even talking about climate change back then, okay? So you can't tell me that, hey, this hasn't, this is a new issue. This is a new issue facing renters due to climate change. No, it's not, okay? Heat's been around forever. So we don't need to change the laws. The laws that we have in place right now are already working. And yeah, there always are going to be a few cases where, somebody tragically experiences negative outcome, right? But that doesn't mean that we need to punish, tens of thousands of bad landlords due to one negative outcome. Okay, anyway, let's get into it. As Kansas City experiences hotter summers, and after senior tenants in a Midtown apartment building went without air conditioning last month, some local officials want to pass more protections for renters during extreme heat. In the midst of the first intense heat wave of the summer, senior tenants at Westport House Apartments in Midtown Kansas City were left without air conditioning for days. The 90-degree temperatures created unbearable conditions for tenants throughout the 12-story building, including Judith Augustine. Everybody who lives here is over 65, said Augustine, 78. We don't do as well in the heat as we would if we were much younger. We have lots of chronic disabilities and so forth here. So just from those first few paragraphs, you get the impression that, okay, we're proposing this law because we have this evil landlord who left these elderly tenants without air conditioning. And if we pass this law, this sort of thing wouldn't happen. But let me continue with the story because there's a little bit more to it that isn't quite being explained yet, okay? Residents at Westport House, which is partially subsidized by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, waited nearly 5 days for repairs to the building's air conditioning. The landlord provided box fans, and the city parked a bus out front to act as a cooling center and dispatched emergency medical personnel to check on residents. So, okay, now we're getting a little bit more about this story that wasn't explained in the first, explained in the first few paragraphs. Now we find out that, hey, the reason that these tenants didn't have air conditioning wasn't because the landlord was greedy. The air conditioner broke. And unfortunately, due to probably, having to wait for contractors, wait for parts, whatever, right? It took 5 days to get it fixed. And the landlord did the best they could by providing box fans, notifying the city so that the city could set up a cooling bus, did everything they could for these people to make sure that they were taken care of. So this story is a horrible example, okay? Stuff breaks. It wasn't like this landlord wasn't providing air conditioning, and this law that they're proposing that mandates landlords to have air conditioning would do absolutely nothing to have changed the situation that is told in this story, in this article. It would have done nothing because the landlord still would have needed time to repair the air conditioner, still would have done the landlord sounds like did everything that they could do in a bad situation to get this taken care of. Like I said, it does not benefit a landlord at all to sit there and say, oh, I'm just going to leave the air conditioner broken. Now, there are exceptions to this, right? And I need to make this clear because I talk about rent control all the time. In places like New York, where there are rent control laws in place, they basically disincentivize landlords from wanting to do repairs or being able to do repairs because they take away the landlord's ability to increase the rent to cover the cost of the repairs and the maintenance. So, yeah, you are going to find more often in places like that with these strict rent control laws, you're going to find landlords who aren't doing repairs in a timely manner because they can't. They can't afford to do it that way. So, I'm not saying that you shouldn't follow the law if you're in a rent control place, that you shouldn't repair your air conditioner and that you should leave your tenants out to dry, right? But, if it comes down to, hey, you're going to be bankrupt if you do, don't make these sacrifices every once in a while. Well, you know what? It's better to delay it a little bit than be bankrupt, right? Anyway, let me continue. Kansas City doesn't have laws that explicitly require landlords to provide cooling or air conditioning to tenants in extreme heat, nor does it have a formal response plan in place when emergencies like this occur. Ruthie Gurovich is the housing policy manager at the Climate and Community Project, a progressive think tank focused on climate policy. She said few municipalities have laws on the books to protect renters from extreme heat. It's becoming increasingly urgent for cities and states and the federal government to be tackling these issues because climate change is making our summers even hotter, Gurovich said. This is putting people at risk of heat stroke, fainting, cognitive issues right in their own homes. People, like I said, people have been experiencing summer for a very, very long time, okay? This is nothing new. Now, it might be harder for a more sustained period of time than it was in the past. I don't know. I'm not a weather person. I don't know. But I can tell you for a fact that, yeah, even in Kansas City, we've experienced triple-digit heat as much as 40 years ago. 40 years ago when I was 4 years old, we were getting, they have on record, some of the hottest years on record were like back in the 20s and 30s for some places. So isn't that hilarious that, some of the hottest years on record were almost 100 years ago before climate change even was a thought in anyone's mind. So how exactly is that possible? I'm just saying, right? I'm not saying that climate change doesn't exist. What I am saying is that we adapt to whatever issues that we're going to be facing. Okay, so I'm not going to be too worried about it regardless. And when it gets hot, guess what? Like I said before, 99% plus of all landlords already have air conditioning for all their tenants. Even me, working with the lowest income tenants in my Section 8 building duplexes in Kansas City before I sold them, I had air conditioning in every single unit I owned. And that was in Kansas City, it was in the Kansas City area where it isn't even required. But, like I said, it's a smart business decision to have it. But the mandates themselves, I do not agree with. I will never agree with. I don't believe in any more laws, rules, or regulations coming from the government are going to make anything easier for landlords. So let me know what you think of this whole situation. I'll put a link to the article in the description down below.